So it's providential that on my first scheduled Sunday to preach, that the readings would be about the sufferings of Job, and the gospel readings about Jesus calming the storm, and also the privilege of speaking on Father's Day. And the whole theme of the readings are trusting in God in the midst of turmoil, adversity, death, the fear of death, destruction. Because most of you have heard probably that just a few weeks ago, the 7th of May, our son Shawn lost his life in this world, engaged in his work as a tree cutter. He had very dangerous work. And I'll try to relate some of the ways God has blessed us during this most tragic time of our life and the most terrible thing that's ever happened to the Nixon family. And from this, we hope others will benefit and be consoled, just like we have been consoled. It all started, I received a call from the tree company, and I knew it was there had been an accident. I knew it was bad, just by the tone of the call. And all the way to the hospital, I held my first-class relics that I keep with me, prayed like I never prayed before. When I arrived at the hospital, they couldn't release any information to me because his ID had been left at the scene of the accident. They couldn't tell me anything about his condition or even that he was back there. But that was all providential, because as things unfolded, the hours later when they finally were able to tell us, the Lord had taken care of a lot of things in that time. So I was the first one to arrive at the hospital, and they put me in a room by myself. And I remember I was so emotionally upset. I was standing there, and I was shaking all over, and I felt such anguish that I felt like I was going to pass out. And as I stood there praying, suddenly profound peace descended upon me. It was a peace that the world cannot give. Jesus had calmed the storm that raged within me. And as today's reading in the responsorial psalm from Psalm 107 says, they cried to the Lord in their distress, and from their straits he rescued them. He hushed the storm into a gentle breeze, and the billows of the sea were stilled. It was at that moment also that I felt my son Shawn's presence with me in that room, and sensed that he was there spiritually to let me know that he had passed, and to help comfort me and his family. So as the family members started to arrive, that peacefulness within me, that calm feeling that I had been given continued, and through God's grace I was able to assume my role as the father of the family, so that when finally the doctors came in to inform us of his death, we were already somewhat prepared and aware that he had already passed. And we were aware that the physical body that was laying in the other room, he was not there. We realized that he died in the line of duty, the duty of providing for his family. And some of the graces that we have experienced as a family, we want to share with this wonderful community that we have that's supported us throughout this whole painful time. And hopefully this will encourage everybody, just like it's encouraged us. First of all, our families received great consolation from all the wonderful people who have helped us with their kind words, their prayers, their acts of love in bringing us meals, sending us cards, having masses said for Shawn, and overall just feeling empathy for our sorrow. You know, truly we are, as Christians, part of one great mystical body, and what the pangs that one person feels are felt by others. Pope John Paul said once that suffering is present in the world in order to release love, in order to give birth to works of love towards neighbor, in order to transform the whole of human civilization into a civilization of love. In our faith and what the church teaches, this has also been a great source of consolation. And our faith teaches that Jesus is the Lord of our lives. And as St. Augustine once said, that all that happens to us in this world against our will happens to us only by the will of God. only by the will of God, and by the disposal of providence, by his orders, and under his guidance. God has everything planned. He has every moment of our life planned within his will, and especially he has the moment of our death planned. That's one thing we don't have to worry about. God's got it all planned perfectly, and his goal is to bring us to heaven. So God will take care of that. We have to trust what he does in our life and in the lives of others. So understanding the will of God helps us to counteract the thoughts that come into my head to torture me. Our thoughts can become like the so-called friends of Job that came to visit him under the pretense of consoling him in the midst of his horrible, tragic situation that Job was in. But they made things worse. So our minds can be our best friends, or they can be our worst enemies. They can plague us with thoughts like, if only I could have, or I would have, or I should have. This happened because of my sins. Oh, I'm driving to the hospital. I'm thinking, Lord, don't hold my sins against my son. But then the Lord quickly put that thought out of my mind. He said, trust in me. Or you think, I should never have done this. I should never have done that. If only I would have spent more time doing this. But when I start feeling despair, I try to remember that our faith teaches that God's providence governs all actions and movements, and nothing happens outside the will of God, except sin. But even when we sin, somehow God brings good out of our mistakes. Even our mistakes, he could work within his divine plan. And as St. Augustine also said, that if we cannot grasp the reason for some event, let's attribute it to divine providence and show him respect by accepting it from his hand and firmly believing that he does not send it without cause. And because God governs all actions and movements, each moment is sacramental in the sense that the invisible will of God is being made manifest in the events that unfold around us, in the world around us. God speaks to us in the sacrament of the moment. These moments can also have an allegorical or parabolic sense that conveys a message to us from God. In both the Old and New Testament, God spoke in parables. In the book of Isaiah, he said, I will speak to them in parables. I will open my mouth to them in parables and reveal to them what has been hidden since the dawn of time. So it could be said that God speaks in a parabolic language. God also speaks to us through the parables of the events that occur in our life. Every effect is a sign of its cause. And because God is the cause of all causes, every event has some significance. I remember Elizabeth Barrett Browning wrote that all the earth is crammed with heaven, and every common bush is afire with God. But only those who see take off their shoes. So do we go through life with a sense of reverence at what is happening and unfolding around us? Do we go through life with the trust that Jesus is our Savior, that Jesus has everything in control? So that night, when we were leaving the hospital, we started looking for ways that God was communicating to us. We trusted somehow that God would explain his will to us. Before we left the hospital parking lot, we gathered in a circle and held each other and prayed. And then Mike, Ty, and Maria, my three kids, they had been playing golf before they received the call to come to the hospital. And it must have been a few minutes after Shawn had passed. Mike had a shot that was about 25 yards from the hole, and he just chipped it. It went up in the air, bounced, rolled, and hit the flag and went in. It was a total impossible shot. And we felt that Shawn had somehow directed that miraculous shot, because Mike is definitely not a golfer. Most priests, when the bishop lays hands on them, they are infused with the ability to play golf. In fact, they get the faculties to play golf, but somehow Mike was not given that. So Shawn was there to help. So that event is referred to in Nixon family history as the miraculous golf shot. And we were so happy because when you've left your body and you're having fun, that's a pretty good sign. And I've seen that before with situations, other situations. And then later that night, I recalled that a couple of days before his death, I drove Shawn to a fast food place, and he ordered some food. And when we drove up to the window, the cashier told Shawn it was $12.26, but it was paid by the man that went ahead of you. And Shawn and I were like, what? He said, that's never happened to me. I said, no, me either. And the great miracle, it wasn't Chick-fil-A, it was Taco Bell. I know Chick-fil-A does that sometimes, you know. They said, do you want to pay the guy behind you? I said, well, yeah, how much? They said, $14. I'm like, okay, I guess, you know. But we found out later that Shawn died at 12:26. We believe that the drive-through event symbolized what God had done with our son. His debt was paid by the man who went ahead of him, and we know the man is Jesus, the man who went ahead of us, and through dying on a tree, paid the debt of our son Shawn, who also died on a tree. Then the next day, we remembered another unusual event. I think Mike and Jane remembered this one, about when Shawn was 7 years old. And this showed us God's divine providence had everything planned. And there was no reason to feel if I could have, I should have, this kind of thing. God was showing us. And we entered Shawn, he was 7 years old, we entered him in a 1-mile foot race. And the race was sponsored by kind of a quirky group. And because when I enrolled him in the race, they asked me, how long will it take him to run the mile? And I'm like, I don't know. Why? They said, well, that's how we determine the winner, by how close their parents get to guessing. So I put down 12 minutes, 30 seconds. And Shawn came in last place. Now, Dasha would have come in first place, but his shoe was falling off. But Shawn came in very last place. I remember his face was so red and he was so tired. And so we went to this hall where they had like a banquet, an awards ceremony. And they called the first place winner and they announced it was Shawn, who won first place in the race. And I remember how surprised and embarrassed he was. He was like looking like, what? And he went up and got his first place prize. Now, traditionally in our family, we thought that was prophetic because Shawn became later a great track star through high school and college. He could have even qualified the Olympics in long distance running. So we thought that was kind of prophetic about that. But they said, I guess 12 minutes, 30 seconds, and they said my guess was just a few seconds off. Could it be that Shawn finished his race at 12:26? The exact time he finished his race here on earth? The exact time he died 38 years later? So Shawn was the last in our family to develop his belief and his relationship with God. And we believed he's the first to go to heaven. From the time he was in high school through college, and even after, Shawn claimed that he did not believe in God. He used to climb mountains, and one time he was climbing a mountain, his friend Brent took a picture of him, and right above him was an old pictograph that the Indians had put there, this is in Colorado, of the Blessed Mother, and Shawn wrote on the back, "See, Mom and Dad, the Blessed Mother's watching over me." So he still had some, but he thought intellectually it was hypocritical because he didn't really believe, so he didn't pray, join in on our family things. So we prayed and prayed for many years for his conversion. We knew it would take a miracle. I remember doing a 9-day novena one time, and on the 9th day, he calls me and said, "Dad, I had a dream last night that Grandpa, Gene's dad, came to me in a dream, and he was in a blue suit, and his eyes were so blue and sparkling, and he took me to Mass." I'm saying, "Wow, son, coincidentally, I just finished a 9-day novena for you." And there's like silence on the other end. So we started praying. We changed our intentions. We prayed that he would have a miraculous conversion. And one day he was helping a friend cut a tree, and he had a chainsaw. It was a borrowed chainsaw, and it wouldn't shut off, it wouldn't idle, it just kept going. And the tree fell wrong and pushed that moving chainsaw into his skull. And although Shawn felt the intense vibration touching his head, his teeth vibrating, there was absolutely no cut on his head, not even a red mark. At that moment, Shawn believed in God. So parents, fathers, mothers, don't give up praying for your children. Pray, pray, pray. We were at a stage where I was just like, okay, Lord, you handle this. I'm just not going to worry about it anymore. Because I was like the gardener who keeps pulling up the plant to check the roots to see if they're growing. The last will be first. The signs that Shawn went to heaven started coming so numerous that Jean had to start writing them down. A few days after his death, Jean was praying, and she asked that God would give her a sign that Shawn was in heaven. And the next morning, a tree had fallen down in our front yard. But not just any tree, but a tree that Shawn had told us and even our neighbors across the street that tree needs to come down. I'm going to bring it down, cut it down when I have time. So the tree was pulled up from its roots when it was pushed down. It was not top heavy, and there was no wind that night. We didn't even hear it come down. And also it fell at the only angle that would not hit the house or other property. And the tree guys who had worked with Shawn, they were so sweet. They came to our house, they volunteered to cut it and haul it away, and they marveled at the precise way that it failed. They were like marveling at his work. Yeah, man, Shawn did good work here, you know. They wanted to take little souvenirs of the tree, you know. And one of the guys said that if he would have cut it, that's exactly how he would have felled it, at that exact angle that it was pushed over. And of course, we had him leave the bottom part of the tree and the roots as a relic. And we're going to have a shrine there. So, of course, the day that happened was a very difficult day because we were having the viewing at the funeral home. And that morning, after we looked at the tree, I was also given a message from heaven. Several times over the years, Shawn had told me that every time he heard Willie Nelson sing, he would think of me. That's because when he was growing up, I really loved Willie Nelson. I don't listen to him that much anymore. I have Spotify on my phone. I've got 500 songs. I've only got 9 Willie Nelson songs. So I hardly ever listen to him. But a few hours before the viewing, I was walking out the yard. I had my cell phone in my pocket, and it wasn't on Spotify. That I know. The screen may have been on. But then all of a sudden it started playing a Willie Nelson song. And the name of the song, it's a rendition of an old song, but it's called I'll Be Seeing You. I'll be seeing you in all the old familiar places that this heart of mine embraces all day through. In that small cafe, the park across the way, the children's carousel, the chestnut trees, the wishing well. I'll find you in the morning sun and when the night is new. I'll be looking at the moon, but I'll be seeing you. Wow. And another amazing thing, has Willie Nelson ever been mentioned 5 times in a homily? This is probably a first, yeah? So God also had given me a premonition that Shawn would die before I did, and something I never shared with anybody. Ever since we lived in Tallahassee, the last 26 years, whenever I drive by this one funeral home, I would get this sinking feeling, and I would think of Shawn. To the point when I drive by, I wouldn't even look at it, I would just make the sign of the cross, you know. I never shared this, but my boys handled all those things, picking the funeral home. And guess which one they picked? It was that funeral home. But they were wonderful. They handled everything beautifully, and then I don't feel that when I go by there now. So we've also received great consolations that the church teaches that we have a natural body, like St. Paul says, and we have a spiritual body. And this understanding has helped me to deal with some of my grief. You know, when the doctor said that he had died, we said that we know his body's back there, but he's not there. And the doctor said, I believe also. So once when I started thinking about Shawn's beautiful eyes, I was looking at a picture of him, and he's, you know, such a handsome man. And I started feeling this great loss and profound sadness, the sadness of loss. that only a parent could feel. And then God reminded me that his blue eyes were beautiful only because his soul gave form and beauty to his earthly body. And now his blue eyes are perfectly and eternally beautiful in his glorified body. The soul gives form to the body. And when the soul leaves the body loses its form. And then I feel grief thinking about all the good he could have had in his life had he not died. Then my faith reminds me that good is defined as something that attains to the true and perfect good and purpose for which it was created. So Shawn was created to know, love, and serve God in this life, and know, love, and serve him for all eternity. In heaven, Shawn's attained the ultimate good. He is in heaven. So now I say, where do your kids live? And I say, I've got some kids living here, and then I've got one son in heaven. Shawn, he's attained the highest good. And when I feel sorrow in thinking that Shawn is no longer enjoying the beauty of this world, he loved the outdoors, then I'm reminded that our faith teaches that whatever is beautiful in this world is only a hazy reflection of the true, perfect, and eternal beauty of heaven. That beauty in this world only exists because it participates in the divine beauty. It participates in the divine beauty of God. And our faith teaches that through observing the world around us, we can be lifted up to understanding heavenly archetypes. There's trees here because there's perfect trees in heaven. When Our Lady appeared to the children in Fatima, Portugal in 1917, she would have come through a door would open up in the sky, and she would come, and then she would leave through that door, and it would close very quickly behind her. And sometimes the children would catch a glimpse of the other side, and they would see beautiful trees, green grass, flowers. And when Our Lady would leave through the door, it would quickly close behind her, so quick that one of the Fatima children worried that the door would slam on the hem of her dress. She was concerned about that, you know. So there's a world that God has prepared for us that is so beautiful and perfect that we can hardly begin to even imagine what God has planned for us. I think we're going to really be surprised when we die and our relatives is there to greet us into heaven. And if we've lost any children, we greeted them when they came into this world, and they're going to greet us when we come into the eternal world. In fact, we're receiving so many wonderful and consoling signs from Shawn that I privately began to worry. And this, dads, you could all understand this because most dads would worry about this. I worried that Shawn would spend so much time here on earth that he would miss his flight to heaven. And that he would get stuck here, maybe having to go standby or something. Then we received another sign. Jean and I were staying at our kids' beach house for a few days. And I'd just been worrying about that the night before. And then our granddaughter, Eve just became a nurse. I've got pictures, and I can show them to you. Anyway, Eve called. She had had a dream, and as soon as the phone rang, we had 2 cardinals come against the windows, fluttering against the windows at 2 different sides of the house. And so Eve told us the dream that she had. She was with Shawn. He was at a table, and he was eating and really happy. And there were stairs. And then he got up, and he told Eve, says, watch this. And he walked up the stairs, and as he got to the top of the stairs, his body started becoming translucent. And then he turned around, and as he walked down the stairs, his body became solid again. He did that twice. My fears were subdued. My prayers were answered. You know, and all that time the birds were there against the windows fluttering. The birds stayed there. We left. Kathy and her family got there, and the birds are still there. The little grandkids are saying, Uncle Shawn's birdies. They'll tap on the window, and the bird's looking through it. The dog will stick his face up there. The bird doesn't even flinch, you know. But tradition has it that cardinals are a sign that a loved one in heaven is sending their love. So the dream confirmed that God gave him the power to go back and forth from heaven to earth. In fact, all the residents of heaven are capable of doing this if God gives them permission. When we die, we have a spiritual body. It is a glorified body, but it is not fully glorified until the end of time at the final judgment. That doesn't change anything. It enhances our joy in heaven. And this body, or what we should say in physics would say, the energy of this body is somehow reunited with us in heaven. And it enhances our glory. It completes us. But it does not mean that when we die, we're just anemic little spiritual body waiting for our glorified body. Because the saints on earth could do all kinds of things. God manifests the power of the glorified body through them. Are we going to think that we don't have the same ability? Our relatives communicate with us. We sometimes just don't see it. The communion of saints is real. Our family has shared also with each other that we feel that Shawn's in the hands of the Blessed Mother. And we've talked about different signs we got from that. And then our son Ty had a dream. He was with Shawn. They were standing by a beautiful lake. Shawn had been swimming in and out, and they were standing on the shore. And then Ty's talking small talk, probably about sports. And then he realized, oh my gosh, I'm with Shawn. I've got to say something important and remember it so I can tell the family that I talked with him. So he looked at Shawn and he said, Shawn, everyone is saying that you're with the Blessed Mother. Are you? And Shawn just started smiling. His smile became so radiant and joyful. His whole face lit up. And that was the end of the dream. Now, Ty said, I never would have asked him that in real life. Ty, you probably would have asked him about Super Bowl stuff, you know. So through all the consoling signs God's given us, our deep sorrow is gradually turning into a joy and a love and gratitude for God, where we can make an act of love. You know, St. Paul, the holy Belgian Benedictine priest, said that an act of love for God in suffering gives astonishment to the angels. An act of love for God in suffering shines for all eternity. He says, happy are those who can make an act of love for God in suffering. So, the saints are in heaven. The saints are our loved ones. They are there interceding for us. The veil between here and heaven is thinner than we think. We can pray to them. You know, if we can FaceTime each other, someone on the other side of the world, FaceTime them on our cell phone, do we think the saints don't have good communication with us? Like the saints are thinking in heaven, wow, I wish we had those cell phones that we used to have, you know? So as we receive Jesus today in Holy Communion, let's thank God for raising up all of our loved ones, especially our fathers that have died. And on Father's Day, thank God for raising them up to glory where no eye has seen, no ear has heard, and no mind has conceived what God has prepared for those who love him. So let's pray for the grace that when we leave this world, we'll go to heaven and reunite with our loved ones and share with them all of our love and fellowship in a world without end.